I'd like to call the Fly Quiet meeting Tuesday, January 19th, 2021 to order. Jeanette, can you roll?
Bensonville.
Present.
City of Chicago 39th Ward.
Here.
Des Plaines. Des Plaines.
Yeah, he's right there.
Okay. Elmhurst.
Here.
Harwood Heights.
Here.
Niles.
Here?
Park Ridge.
Here.
River Grove.
Here.
Schaumburg.
Here.
Schiller Park.
Here.
And Wooddale.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Jeanette. Do I hear a motion to approve December 8th, 2020 minutes?
I'll move so.
Second,
Second from
any comments?
Park.
Yeah, Chair, this is Ernie in Park Ridge. Jeanette, I apologize. I should have called you in advance, but I just read these last night. It may be on the tape that I said it this way, but on page 4, the second paragraph to the end where it says I suggested that based on IFQ reports, yada, yada. That last line that says runway 9 right, 27 left should be considered a long runway alternate. If I said it in that way, I misspoke. That should have been more in the form of an interrogatory or a question along the lines of should it be considered a long runway alternate? Again, if it's on the tapes the way that it's in the minutes, I apologize. I would say that I misstated my position on that.
Okay, I'll make the change.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Can I hear an approval of the minutes with the change? Jeanette, would you call the roll?
Sure. Bensonville.
Yes.
City of Chicago 39th Ward.
Yes.
Des Plaines. Elmhurst.
Yes.
Harwood Heights.
Yes.
Niles.
Yes.
Park Ridge.
Yes.
River Grove.
Yes.
Schaumburg.
Yes.
Schiller Park.
Yes.
And Wooddale.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have a couple opening remarks I'd like to make first, if you don't mind. Before we continue with the rest of the agenda, I would like to go over the game plan for today for the rest of our meetings going forward. I touched upon this Friday at the general meeting, but I would like it in the minutes for the record. Generally, what we're going to be doing here is following Robert's rules. Up until this point, I think I've let the rules lax a little bit just so we have an open and robust discussion on all alternatives. We've come to the point now where I think we're past the need for a robust discussion, and now we need to get down to business, the business at hand. Today, first we'll have comments from the ONCC members. Second, I will ask the non-voting members on the committee to summarize their latest positions and submissions in 3 minutes. This will be an opportunity for them to be on the record. Third, I will call for a motion in a second to approve Fly Quiet alternatives, one at a time. After the motion in a second, Ryan Anderson will be asked to give a quick summary of that particular alternative. Once the summary is complete, I will ask the voting members to state their position on the approval or rejection of the alternative on the floor, which means what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to call your name, and then you're going to get an opportunity to state your opinion. This is going to be in the form of a debate and not a discussion. So you'll present your position if you have one, and we'll move on that way. As soon as everybody gets a chance to state their position, I'll give time for a rebuttal from the group the same way. I'm asking that everybody takes no longer than 3 minutes. I think at this point, we could probably distill whatever we have to say in 3 minutes or less. But if I'm wrong, we'll see. After the debate and rebuttal, there will be a call for the vote. Simple as that. If you vote yes for the alternative, that means it's the alternative we're going to begin to look at in the future. you will vote no for the alternative, that means the alternative will be set aside, not put away and forgotten, but just set aside at this point so that we can concentrate on the one that we approved. Are there any comments now from the ONCC members? We're on number 4 of the agenda. No comments? All right, then I'm going to give an opportunity for the non-voting members of the committee to give their summaries. I'll start with Fair.
Thank you, Joe. Everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'll just ask whoever's the timekeeper, just give me a minute's notice and I'll try and wrap up. It's trying to summarize 5 years in 3 minutes will be a bit of a challenge, but I'll do my best. Okay. I guess what we agree with is there has been an overwhelming amount of analysis to date, and this is often focused on parallel versus diagonal usage. What we sort of asked is, have we lost focus on one of the key objectives, which is predictability? And when we did some analysis, we found the answer was yes, and by a surprising amount. And what really impacts the predictability is wind. You know, wind doesn't follow the published schedule and is really the lived experience for residents. So the way we address wind is by assigning a secondary configuration for each primary configuration. And the secondary configuration must only impact the same quadrants as the primary to be predictable. However, there are 2 proposed configurations that don't meet this criteria, configurations I and L. Reliance on these configurations eliminates any predictability in those weeks. And this is because the long runway pairing swaps airfields. But it's not just predictability that's impacted by configurations I and L. This is because predictability and airfield balance go hand in hand. The best analogy I can make is using buckets. If you look at alternative H and west flow, you have 3 buckets in the south airfield, but only 1 bucket in the north. And I think this is an easy problem to see, understanding the airfield is west flow dominant. With alternative H, this translates into a risk of 12 weeks of noise for the south airfield. And this is just basic probability. If you have an airfield that's 60 to 80% west flow, and 3 out of every 4 configurations utilize the south airfield, overutilization of the south airfield can't be avoided. What you need is a balanced, equal number of buckets in each airfield. Then in west flow, the north and south airfields are balanced, and the same for east flow. So what we recommend the committee do is advance the 2 core contrasting concepts, which is full in north-south airfield, crosswind and hybrid configurations, and that alternatives B and G all have some merits of each worth considering. And this will provide an objective comparison of predictability and airfield balance. We recommend you not advance alternative H for failing to meet the criteria in 2 areas. First, it's the only alternative putting primary and secondary configurations in consecutive weeks. This is something we've always avoided due to the certain consecutive impacts. It's also putting this burden only on selected communities, not equally across all communities. And we fear this would devolve the process into a punitive system, which should be avoided. Secondly, we feel you should defer alternative H is because it didn't meet the submission deadline. And this deadline was a matter of public record on multiple occasions. And given the significance of the decisions, we need to be transparent and address this issue.
5 seconds, Dan.
Yeah. You said 1 minute?
No, 5 seconds. In fact, time's up. That was 3 minutes.
Okay. Could I just make one closing statement?
Late.
All right. In closing, we hope the committee will consider the significance of predictability and airfield balance. Failing to achieve these key objectives would be critical oversight, lead to dissatisfaction with the plan. We must remember the FAA's role is to disclose the impacts of the proposed alternatives, not correct them. It's our job to solve these issues here, and we just get one chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. JDA's next.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Annunzio. Our goal here today is to minimize and equally distribute aircraft noise at night, provide relief to all communities, reduce impacts to the highest impacted communities, and provide predictability. SOC's recommendation is to proceed with alternative number 1 as alternative H and alternative number 2 as alternative B. Alternative H provides for the fairest distribution of operations across all runways. This was illustrated in RRP 2 that demonstrated equal schedule burden to east, west, diagonal east, and diagonal west flow and produced the fairest balance of runway utilization. Split airfield concepts in general provide the best relief for period wind management. Alternate configurations rely on the same half of the airfield during 927 weeks and 1028 weeks, keeping the other side half of the airfield quiet regardless of wind. They keep north to north and south to south, respecting relief to neighboring quadrants and provide for the lowest ATC workload. Full airfield concepts, in contrast, rely on 4 quadrants of the airfield to provide alternate wind configurations, increase air traffic workload by keeping both halves of the airfield active, and fail to keep north to north and south to south, further reducing periods of relief to neighboring quadrants. Additional wind analysis is not necessary with these two alternatives because the updated wind row still represents OMP airfield configuration, and RRP further demonstrates the viability of equal schedule burden on all runways. We had a wealth of lessons from RRP 1 through 3, which varied in the number of weeks from 12 weeks to 25-week schedules, varied in east-west, diagonal east and diagonal west flow configuration burden, but altogether demonstrated that all runways can produce periods of relief for neighboring communities in all wind conditions, and that the best runway, fairest runway utilization is produced when there's equal schedule burden to west flow, east flow, diagonal west flow, and diagonal east flow. There's significant wind summary analysis that goes with each one of these studies. I would recommend members to go look at that. CDA and Landerman Brown did an excellent job at looking at wind. They predicted wind early on and demonstrated that configurations we were relying on were viable in all wind conditions. We learned some important lessons from these 3 tests, including avoiding mixed use, minimizing convergent runway operations. But most importantly, I think we demonstrated that in alternate wind scenarios, we could still get the fairest balance in runway use through equal schedule burden to all runways available for use at night. I provided some summaries to the committee that demonstrated split in airfield use as far as schedule burden of operations to the various communities. And we recommend B and H for both reasons: fairest distribution of noise, best management of wind in alternate weeks. In each case, in alternate weeks, half of the airfield can remain silent.
You have 10 seconds.
And finally, H provides for a 16% burden to east-west flow for the parallel communities, a 15% east-west flow burden to the diagonal communities, whereas B, C, D, E, and F have a 20% split to the parallels and a 10% split to the diagonals, and G is the worst scenario that provides a 22% split to the parallel east and west versus only 5.5% to the diagonal communities. For those reasons, we recommend moving forward with alternatives H as number 1 and B as number 2. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We seem to have a glitch here. Glenview wished to speak as a ONCC member, but wasn't able to because of a technical difficulty. But now they have fixed the technical difficulty and they wish to say something. So I'm going to allow it if it's okay with everybody. Glenview?
Hi, this is Michelle from the Village of Glenview. Glenview is adamantly opposed to alternative H as it relies too heavily on the shorter, narrow, diagonal runways. 50% of the recommended profiles would use the diagonals, which are the least safe for the planes and passengers in part due to the following. Historic records of prevailing winds and runway usage at O'Hare prove that the diagonal runways are not optimal in most of the existing wind conditions, as they would not be used very often because of the reduced safety margins. Alternative H would force many more aircrafts into less safe crosswind takeoff and landing conditions on the diagonal runways than previously under the Fly Quiet program, when the diagonals were rarely used. And the short length and width of the diagonal runways provide far less safety margin during takeoff and landing emergencies than the longer, wider runways. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenview. Any other non-voting member wish to speak?
Hey, Joe, it's
Mr.
Ron.
Chairman.
Can I say a couple things?
Sure, Ron.
As others have said, I think one of the important things is the predictability for the residents. That was one of the original things when this whole process started. Too simple for the air traffic controllers to make sure that they would actually be able to use it. With that, I think the full airfield options prevent some challenges because the air traffic controllers' attention is going to be split, as others have said, between north and south at the same time. I think of the alternatives, when you look at them too, you need to really consider consecutive impacts, and that's not arrivals versus departures. If it's an arrival one week and a departure the next week going over the same area, that's still an impact to those residents that are underneath those flight paths. So some of the alternatives that are out there present that, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed. And then I think lastly, to keep this in mind, is that noise is always changing. And I think some people may be hesitant to vote on one versus the other because they think this is the end all be all and that it's going to be this way from here to eternity. And that's just not the way the noise works. Things will change over time. It may be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, or 2 years from now. So this isn't the end all be all. It's what is best to work in the interim, I guess, in the next several years. And then as time goes on, as this stuff is implemented, changes may be made. So people just need to keep that in mind, that it needs to be flexible and things may change in the future.
Okay, thank you, Ron. If we may move on now to approvals.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just a point of order. Is a member allowed to yield time during this,
Sorry,
during this?
I forgot to mention that. Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Yield your time to a non-voting member.
I'm sorry?
You can yield your time to either a non-voting member or a voting member.
Yes, I'd like to yield 30 seconds of my time to the representative from FAIR to complete his comments, please.
Okay, when I call for you, you want them to begin your 30 seconds or end it? Well, it's up to you. It's up to you, however you want to do it.
Mr.
No,
Chair,
I thought since we were in non-voting member now, Joe, I thought it'd be appropriate if I could yield the time now just for continuity. If not, that's fine. I would yield at the beginning of my time then.
Okay, yeah, let's do it that way just to keep it straight. Malcolm.
Yeah, I was going to do the same, but we'll follow your directions.
Okay. All right, thank you. I hear a motion and a second to approve alternative B. Motion to approve alternative B.
I'll make a
Anyone?
motion that we approve, or approve what we're going to use, Joe, or do we want to like move it forward for further consideration? I can
Chairman.
approve is fine. I just want to make sure I'm using the right
I
language.
mean,
Chairman, this is Aaron Frame with the CDA. Point of order. The city would ask that you use the term move it forward or something to that effect.
Advance.
Okay. I will make a motion that we advance alternative B for further refinement.
All right, do I hear a second?
Second from Shore Park.
Very good. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'll call off each member and you'll have 33 minutes, not 33, you'll have 3 minutes to make your statement, starting with Bensonville.
Evan, do you have any comments?
I'm sorry, I was distracted. Where are we at in point of order? I'm sorry. Is there a motion? Do we have a second?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Your
so,
turn.
so now we're at the speaking
Yes.
part of it. Quickly put, I would like to stand up and advocate on behalf of alternative B. Alternative B should move forward to the next phase of analysis and revision. For these reasons as follows. It's consistent. These configurations have appeared in the interim flight quiet period. It makes full use of the airfield. It's easy to understand. It does not require the use of a decoder ring to determine if you're going to be scheduled to receive flights over your house, and does not rely on RNAV for implementation. I believe alternative B can be improved with some minor tweaks to the schedule, and we can address those concerns in the next round of analysis and revision. I ask as a member of the Flight Quiet Committee, you join me in voting to move this alternative forward. I yield my time to the chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Bensonville. Chicago, 39th Ward.
Ditto for the 39th ward with what Evan just said. We are in favor of advancing alternative B. We like the idea of the split airfield. We like the idea of the vector headings put forth in alternative B. We think it distributes the noise equally. We suffer more from arrivals than the departures, and this recognizes that and allows for relief in that regard. So we definitely advocate for moving alternative B forward.
Okay, thank you. Displays.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to give 30 seconds of my remarks over to Dan Dreyer for any comment on this, and then I will finish up. Thank you.
Okay, Dan.
Okay. First, just a quick thing to remind everyone, all these alternatives have consecutive impacts. The order can be changed, of the configurations and headings can be changed. I think the major detriment to B is you're conceding full-length departures on the South Airfield. You're using a conflicted North Airfield, and with the reliance on INL, I think a imbalance to the South Airfield is inevitable. If you look at the departures, you have 4 weeks to the southwest and 4 to the northeast, and 2 only to the 2 remaining. And these are key likely headings for alternates. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I'll use the balance of the time remaining. So I'm going to vote not to advance this one, although it's a close one for me. I think I prefer some of the other alternatives for some of the reasons that Dan enunciated. Thank you.
Explains. Elmhurst.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. Elmhurst is in support of alternative B. It has a lot of appealing characteristics, as was mentioned before. It's pretty simple to review and understand for the pilots, the air traffic control, and more importantly, the general public and elected officials. Uses the split airfield concept to move the traffic around from north-south crosswind, and it's evenly balanced between in the plan east and west. So I am in full support. Elmhurst is in support of alternative B. Thanks.
Thank you. Howard Heights.
Hi, I too vote to advance alternate B. I think it is a good split decision between North and South airfields, as I've said before. In addition, most runway maintenance can be pre-planned in advance. When utilizing the north runways, you can plan for maintenance on the south runways. Of course, nothing is perfect. There will be instances where exceptions will be made for maintenance or wind or weather, but I think this is the best alternative. We are looking to spread quiet time among the communities that utilize the airport. And I think this is one of the best alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Park Ridge.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I'll hold off on my yield until later as we get further in the discussion. I too would comment that of the alternatives, I see B as being viable for advancement, but I would like to make a couple of comments, and it goes into some of the discussion that we've already had. I just did a simple analysis of the 45 weeks that we've been under IFQ, both the first phase and now the second phase, which I believe comes to an end in the next week. From that time, we were in west flow 74% of the time and east flow in 26% of the time. And unless we're all Tom Skilling here and can accurately predict, I think we've got issues with predictability simply by trying to suggest that we can turn this airfield around and make it an East Flow airport when the likelihood is if we have consecutive weeks of potential impact, what some of these alternatives do, that we're fooling ourselves into believing that we can just simply say, oh, it's going to be East Flow next week, when in fact, that's not how an airport operates. It operates on the prevailing winds at the time. And again, at least during IFQ, excuse me, we've been in west flow 74% of the time. If we look at it differently, I took the ANMS reports, which of course is not just overnight, which is the 24-hour report. We were in west flow 68% of the time during the last 12 months ended November of last year. So again, that points to that. And then, as I've said before, I have serious concerns of any proposals that includes the crosswinds, simply because, as we've shown with the statistics, you put the crosswinds in the mix, and they don't seem to fulfill what we're trying to do here. I did the analysis on the crosswinds in IFQ. When the crosswinds were used, we had 40% compliance during those first weeks, while we had 73 compliance on simply the parallels. I tossed out the last 3 weeks of IFQ1 because of the issues of COVID, which obviously we began to operate the airport not in its, if you will, normal configuration. I'd make the same comment of all the weeks in IFQ during phase 2, which is COVID impacted. So I think we should all take with a grain of salt those numbers. Having said that, in those weeks that we've completed, we had 22% compliance through week 44 on the when we have the diagonals as the primary usage, and 61% as the parallels. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. I need to apologize to everybody. I had said that Ryan was going to give a summary of B. If you feel it's okay, maybe we could forego his summary, because we seem to be pretty adept on what B is, and I promise the rest of them will get a summary from Ryan. If there isn't a problem with that. Well, thank you. Next is River Grove.
I also agree on B. I think it's the best alternative. Return my time to the chair.
Thank you. Shoulder Park.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, with all the issues that it's near impossible to pick the best alternative that meets all the concerns. We can't predict what the weather is going to be or the winds going to be next week. All we can do is the best we can. Schiller Park agrees to move alternative B forward, as Schiller Park agrees what was already said by everyone on the committee. Shule Park yields the rest of my time to JDA if necessary.
Okay, JDA, you got 2 minutes. JDA?
Hopefully she's still here.
Sorry about that. SOC approves moving alternative B forward. There are some adjustments that need to be made to alternative B to improve the consecutive use of alternate long runways. I think that's switching the order of weeks 4 and 5 and 10 and 11. We believe the Airfield split is second best as far as diagonal versus east-west parallel usage. And JDA, I think for other reasons, we believe in a win scenario, alternative B is superior due to the fact when using the North Airfield, east and west wind dominance is supported by that North Airfield configuration and keeps the silent periods for the 2 quadrants in the south. And the same is true for when the parallel souths are in use. The alternate wind configuration is supported on the south, keeping the north quiet. So we believe it provides for a fair distribution of noise and second fairest in runway utilization. I yield the rest of the time.
Thank you. Wooddale?
Wooddale is in favor of advancing alternative B. I would like to bank my time to JDA if they need more time.
JDA?
I would further that alternative B, we would need to look at the vectors being used in alternative B and recommend that the vector headings did not exceed a 20-degree vector. However, I believe that's a later discussion for refining these alternatives, but just putting that note in for documentation now. I yield the rest of the time.
Thank you. And finally, Niles. I also agree with alternative B for all the reasons that have been given. And because we've been talking about split runway from the beginning, I see alternative B as a good start. I yield the rest of my time. And now we're going to give an opportunity for all the members to rebut. Yeah.
You skipped Schaumburg.
I'm so sorry.
It's fine. I can be super brief because everybody covered all of my speaking points. That Schaumburg is in favor of moving alternative B forward as well for further refinement. So thank you.
I'm sorry. All right. It's time for rebuttal now. I will be calling off the members. If you don't feel a need to rebut, it's okay. It's okay. Bensonville.
I yield.
Chicago Ward 39.
Yield.
Des Plaines.
After listening to the rest of the debate, I'll move it forward.
Elmhurst.
No further comment.
Howard Heights.
Yeah.
Park Ridge.
Yield, Chair.
River Grove.
I yield.
Schaumburg.
Yield.
Schiller Park.
Yield.
Wooddale.
I'm sorry, I stepped away for a minute. Where are we at now?
A rebut. Do you have any rebuttal?
No.
Okay. And finally, Niles, I yield. Now we will call the roll to see if we're going to move this advanced alternative B. Would you say the motion one more time, Jeanette?
The motion is from Karen Robles and second from Trustee Klug to
And-
advance alternative B.
Okay, thank you.
Bensonville,
Aye.
City of Chicago 39th Ward,
Yes.
Des Plaines,
Aye.
Elmhurst,
Aye.
Harwood Heights,
Aye.
Niles,
Yes.
Park Ridge,
Yes.
River Grove,
Aye.
Schaumburg,
Aye.
Schiller Park,
Yes.
and Wooddale.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you, everyone. That went really well. Let's go to alternative C. May I hear a motion to advance alternative C?
I move that.
May I hear a second?
Second.
All right. Can we hear the summary from Ryan?
Morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen really quick. The alternatives that have been presented previously, again, they have not changed in any way. Alternative C is identical to alternative B with one exception. It includes RNAV on the crossing runways, but it is the same 6 configurations that are rotated over a 12-week period. It includes the north and south airfield concepts, and I can, does everyone see my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay. It's better illustrated on the schedule slide, but you can see how we alternate between north airfield, south airfield, crosswind, north airfield, south airfield, crosswind. And the idea again is to isolate operations as best we can to either the north or the south airfield throughout the program. It has 2 vector headings per runway, except for those, again, those crosswind runways where we include a RNAV procedure. It includes 8 east-west configurations and 4 crosswind configuration weeks. And that is alternative C. Again, identical to alternative B, or the exception of RNAV included on the crosswind departure runways. And all RNAV, again, we've talked about in the past. It is a bit of a more complex procedure than vector headings and would require more environmental approval from the FAA. As well as some noise impacts that would be different from vector heading.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. All right. Remarks from committee members, starting with Bensonville.
Yeah, so Bensonville, while we obviously we support the configurations, the RNAV component is so consequential to us that I believe that it is somewhat outside of the purview of this committee. I believe that RNAV should only be considered at the full ONCC level because it is, while it may be beneficial for the majority, the people who are impacted are so negatively, could be so negatively impacted by RNAV that it could ruin their lives. So I don't think that RNAV is under the purview of this community. For that reason, Bensonville will be voting no to Alt C.
Thank you. Chicago, Ward 39.
Again, very similar to what Evan said, we are not fans of RNAV either, even though it really doesn't impact us directly for the reasons stated. We would also not approve of this alternative moving forward.
Thank you. Des Plaines.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've thought about RNAV a lot. It would be beneficial to some of my residents and not beneficial to others. So it's kind of a wash for me. And I voted for the B alternative, so I would probably vote to advance C. And I yield the remainder of my time to Dan.
Dan?
Thank you. And we certainly have our concerns with RNAV, but we also recognize we're not the experts. You know, that's what we have CDA and Landerman Brown and the FAA for. And this committee did take a prior vote to include RNAV in the headings discussion, and we are not at the headings discussion at this point. So while this is a representative example of RNAV, I don't think we should interpret this vote as excluding RNAV from that discussion. This committee did take a majority vote to have that discussion and should honor it when we get to headings. Thank you.
All right. Elmhurst.
Yes, as was mentioned, alternative C is the exact same rotation plan as alternative B, with the addition of RNAV on the crosswind runways for departures. We didn't get a chance to look at the graphic of B, but you can see there's two different takeoff patterns, and one of those conflicts with the arrivals. So you get more impact to populated areas where you have the departure overlapping the arrival footprint. RNAV is something that could be utilized to really take advantage of a unique situation where you have the tollway heading off the northern diagonal going north up the tollway, as well as the southern diagonal where planes can lock into RNAV and fly down that. That is a very wide road with a lot of industrial properties alongside it, especially near O'Hare. So it's advantageous to utilize that for this departure. So Elmhurst is in support of alternative C. I agree that the committee did vote to approve and move forward with RNAV. There seems to be some concern that this would bog things down in the approval process. It might delay it slightly. I disagree. That analysis can be done concurrent with a lot of the other analyses that are being done during environmental impact statement. So in terms of this, I think it's a non-issue. I think it has a lot of upside. So Elmhurst is in support of alternative C, which is the same as B with just a slight difference on the diagonal departure plan. Thanks.
Thank you. Howard Heights.
Sorry. I think due to its complex nature and needing further FAA research and approval, I think this is something we can look at in the foreseeable future. But as of right now, I would vote no for alternative C.
Thank you. Park Ridge.
Thank you, Chair. We would not be in favor of alternate C being pushed forward. I'll save everybody the time. We would concur with Evan's comments that we feel at this point introducing that option in C with RNAV would delay the process, and I don't think we're there at this point. So we'll be not in favor of advancing C.
Thank you. River Grove.
I also concur. Do not like the idea of C. I return my time to the chair.
Schaumburg.
Thanks, Joe. So this is an interesting one for Schaumburg. We don't have a direct impact by a proposed RNAV departure, and so I was interested to hear what everyone had to say. And I think Dan's point was well taken that we had previously discussed this, but I will say what I'm hearing today is that those communities who would be directly impacted by an RNAV procedure no longer seem to be advocating on behalf of that approach, Elmhurst excluded. And so, you know, if there isn't going to be a community that stands up and advocates for this, I think my position is similar to some of the other members, and that I have serious concerns about the concentrated impact of noise that would result from an RNAV procedure, and the fact that while we might provide some moderate relief to some residents, there's going to be some offsetting impacts to other residents who are going to experience really concentrated noise. And I'm not sure that's in the long-term best interests of what we're trying to accomplish here. So at this point, I'd say Schaumburg is not in favor of RNAV procedures, and I'll yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Schiller Park.
Schiller Park concurs. Schiller Park is not in favor of C. We think it's going to be too much of an impact on the north side of town where they're going to be constantly bombarded by the RNAV procedure. So again, Schiller Park is not in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Wooddale.
Wooddale is not in favor.
All right, and then finally, Niles. Niles is not in favor because I see alternative C, or we see alternative C as a must. And at this point, I don't think it's appropriate to say must for RNAV. I think that could be a further discussion later on, if appropriate, but it's not time now to say we are going to do RNAV. For that reason, Niles is going to say no to that. Time for rebuttal. Bensonville.
I yield.
Chicago, Ward 39.
Yield.
Des Plaines.
I yield some of my time to Dan Dreyer.
All right, Dan.
Thank you. And just to follow up on some of the conversation, we agree there are concerns with RNAV, but I don't think what we want to have is regret that we never looked at something. You know, we've only looked at it on a piece of paper. And even though members' opinions may have changed as we get towards the decision point, since there was a majority vote, there should at least, regardless of what alternatives advance, some sort of presentation by Landrum and Brown, so we can at least say we looked at everything and here's why we either chose to do something or not to do something. And I think that same philosophy applies to all the core concepts. Are we eliminating things today without doing the analysis or really doing an objective analysis? So we'd ask that you apply that to all these concepts as you're deciding what to advance today. Thank you.
Elmhurst.
I appreciate the comment by Schaumburg that this is really, with alternative C, the RNAV question is a diagonal community issue. The community is impacted by the parallels. Really not see any difference in traffic either way. But yeah, I think it's premature to throw this out. There's a lot more complex issues that the FAA is able to easily contend with. Having them take a further look at this and as a viable option as one of our objectives to fairly distribute noise so that we're not having departures fly over the same arrival pattern. I think that needs to be looked at further and to impact the least amount of people to be able to fly over those routes that are the tollway that is certainly a preferred route for aircraft to be flying over, especially at night. Thanks.
Yeah. Howard Heights.
I yield.
Park Ridge.
Yield.
River Grove.
Yield.
Schaumburg.
So I just want to respond briefly to what Dan said. I think that we did take a vote to include RNAV, and that's how we got to this point. And we included alternatives that provided an overview of what an RNAV heading might look like and for consideration by this committee. So to me, a vote to not advance alternative C is not for lack of analysis. It's that we included them. The committee has heard from the experts on kind of what that means. And now we're at a point to decide if an RNAV procedure should or should not move forward for further analysis. And so I don't think we lack for information or analysis. And I think that's true of kind of all of the things that we're considering. And so, I just wanted to clarify that. So I'll yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Schaumburg. Schiller Park.
Yield Park yields, no comment, but I yield my time to JDA if she has any other comments she'd like to make about C.
JDA?
Thank you, Russell. I think the committee is wise on the consensus that I'm hearing in RNAV. I do believe it would result in a delay to fully analyze RNAV. It requires a noise study to determine what the pre and post RNAV impacts are. That's a lengthy process. I do, though, think that the committee as a whole is going to have an opportunity to revisit RNAV when the FAA revisits the Metroplex. If they do that in Chicago, the FAA just released the Florida Metroplex recommendations, which were delayed for a very long time. So that process is starting to work its way back into moving forward. At that time, RNAV can be considered for all runways at Chicago, and the burden of the cost to analyze that would be on the FAA. I yield the rest of the time.
Thank you, JDA. Wooddale.
Wooddale yields.
All right, Niles. What I have to say isn't a rebuttal. It's basically repeating what Schaumburg said, and basically ICC is a must to look at RNAV. That doesn't mean we're going to forget about RNAV from then on. I mean, they may be able to fit into B. I don't know. So we'll see. For that reason, I'm voting no for alternative C. Jeanette?
There's a motion by Alderman Dunn and a second by Alderman Chester to advance alternative C. Roll call. Bensonville.
No.
City of Chicago 39th Ward.
No.
Des Plaines.
Yes.
Elmhurst.
Aye.
Harwood Heights.
No.
Niles.
No.
Park Ridge.
No.
River Grove.
No.
Schaumburg.
No.
Schiller Park.
No.
And Wooddale.
Go.
Alternative C does not advance.
Thank you. To alternative D. We have a motion and a second to advance alternative D.
Can we get a summary of alternative D prior to the motion?
Oh, no, we'll have the motion, then he'll have the summary, and then we'll have the debate. Because Robert's rule says you shouldn't have a discussion unless it's within a motion. And I'm trying to follow that. So there'll be a motion, a second, and then we'll have the summary.
I'll make a motion to advance alternative D.
Do your second?
I second.
All right, you're on, Ryan.
Okay, alternative D. Alternative D is a 12-week rotation schedule that includes 10 configurations. This alternative introduces the full airfield concept. This slide here illustrates it best, where we have operations on both the north and south airfield during the same week. So you'll see we're alternating east flow and west flow, and then interjecting crosswind runways, but the operations are occurring on both the north airfield and the south airfield, opposed to isolating those to one airfield or the other. This also has vector headings only, There is only one vector heading per east-west wind configurations and 2 vector headings per crosswind configuration. There are 8 east-west configuration weeks and 4 crosswind configuration weeks. So again, the major difference between alternative D and alternatives B and C is the full airfield concept, where we have the operations occurring on both north and south airfield from week to week.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Wait, can we begin with discussion starting with Bensonville?
Yeah, so I think alternative D is an interesting concept because while it does accomplish the goal of spreading out the noise of O'Hare Airport, it doesn't provide relief, in my opinion. Simply put, there's noise everywhere all the time. And while it may be reduced noise, you don't get the provision of having a couple nights a week off or a couple weeks a month off of no noise over your house. So for that reason, the fact that it spreads the noise out but does not provide relief, I'll be voting no. I yield my time.
Thank you. 39th Ward.
I'll also be voting no on this one. We're not a fan of the full airfield concept. We like the as Evan just said, the prospect of total relief and the prospect of consecutive impacts is not what we're for. And also the comments from the air traffic controller with respect to the complications involved in administering the full airfield concept really hit home. So for those reasons, again, we really favor the split airfield concept. And I yield.
Des Plaines.
Yeah, I would like to give some of my time to Dan Dwyer, and I'm still undecided on this one.
All right, Dan.
Not for me. You want me to go ahead?
Yeah.
I think some of the key concepts to take away from D are this is the first example where you're not constrained on full-length departures from the South Airfield. And I think that's going to be an important part of discussion since that is the long runway. And it's not just about the altitude of those departures, but it's the flight track. So in all these alternatives, we still have that tendency to use the South Airfield. And we think you should advance at least one alternative with the full airfield to see what those differences as far as actual noise impacts are. It also represents the flexibility of the full airfield. We've called inboard and outboard runways, in that in these other configurations, your departure path has to first cross over your prior arrival path. And so those people are going to be impacted by both of those. And as far as consecutive impacts, we agree D, and in fact D, aren't structured properly for consecutive impacts, and those crossover headings as primary headings aren't very useful. What we do think crossover headings are useful for is when we get into those discussions of overlapping impacts or imbalances in the airfield. So again, I think two key concepts, full-length departures and the potential use of crossover headings to try and mitigate some of those excessive departure impacts. Thank you.
Elmhurst.
Alternative D has some drawbacks in that you can see consecutive week impacts, week 1 and 2. We're getting those along with 10 and 11. Those parallel communities are impacted. I think the simplicity of split airfield is compromised a little bit on this this plan, where you have to look north and south on the same evening from the flight tower. So I think B has advantages over D, and so Elmhurst is not supportive of D at this point.
Thank you. Howard Heights.
Yes, thank you. I do not feel that that D provides maximum noise relief with the utilization of the full airport as the split north and south runways do. So I would be voting no on this.
Thank you. Park Ridge.
Thank you, Chair. We would not be in favor of alternative D, pushing it forward, dovetailing on the comments that Evan has made, but also concerns in regards to the primary need to operate an airport, which is under safety. I think we have some issues of attempting to run the full airfield and the burden that it'll put on the controllers in the cab at night. Thank you.
River Grove.
I agree 100% that not our alternative. Return my time.
Thank you. Schaumburg.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what's been said. Schaumburg is not supportive of moving this alternative forward for further review, just based on the concerns with the feedback we've received from air traffic control, preferring the split airfield over the full airfield. And also, I agree with Bensonville's comments about what this will actually provide in terms of relief, just given some affairs comments about wind predictability. And it seems that if we can concentrate either north or south, we're providing greater relief with the split airfield approach. I'll yield the rest of my time.
Schiller Park.
Okay, Schiller Park agrees with already's been said. No need to rehash everything. Schiller Park votes no for the proposal, for that alternative.
Thank you. Wooddale.
Wooddale's not in favor of this alternative and yields the rest of my time.
Thank you. And finally, Niles. Dan, you have conceptually some valid points, but practically, I live underneath a runway pattern, and 1,500 feet is just not enough space. It just doesn't work. You hear it. You hear it. So if we set up a situation where every week somebody's going to be hearing it either over their head or 1,500 feet away, it's not relief. It's simply not relief. And that's how I feel about D. All right, time for rebuttal. Bensonville.
I yield my time.
Chicago Ward 39.
Yield.
Splains.
I yield any time I have to Dan.
Dan.
Just
Just to speak at this meeting, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I'm going to be worn out. Just to clarify our comments, Joe, we're not speaking specifically on behalf or opposed to necessarily D or E. We're just pointing out what might be the attributes worth considering, sort of merging some of the concepts into a final alternative. And those key points that we made about full-length departures, that probably being the key, is something we think the committee should continue in some form in the discussion, whether that's on D or E or some other one is up to them. But thank you.
Thank you. Elmhurst.
No further comment.
Howard Heights.
I yield.
Park Ridge.
Yield.
River Grove.
Yield.
Schaumburg.
Yield.
Schiller Park.
Yield.
Wooddale.
Yield.
Niles is yielding. Jeanette, would you please restate the motion and call for a vote?
A motion was made by Karen Robles and seconded by Alderman Dunn to advance alternative D. Roll call. Bensonville.
No.
City of Chicago 39th Ward.
No.
Des Plaines.
No.
Elmhurst.
No.
Harwood Heights.
No.
Niles.
No.
Park Ridge.
No.
River Grove.
No.
Schaumburg.
No.
Schiller Park.
No.
And Wooddale.
No.
Alternative D does not advance.
Okay, thank you. We're to alternative E. Do I hear a motion to to advance alternative E? Somebody?
Joe, if we don't make a motion, does it just die then?
It just dies. If nobody makes a motion, it dies.
Okay, thank you.
Motion to put that on the floor.
Second?
Second it.
Okay. All right. We have a motion and a second for alternative E. Ryan?
Okay, alternative E is the same as alternative D with the exception for including vector headings on the crosswind runway. So the same 10 configurations rotated over a 12-week period. It includes the full airfield concept. There are one vector heading for the east wind runways and one RNAV heading for the crosswind runways. 8 east-west configuration weeks or crosswind configuration weeks over a 12-week period. Again, the same as D, except for RNAV included on the crosswind departure runways.
Okay, thank you. If we may begin the discussion with Bensonville.
So this is, I think, lipstick on a pig. It's a slight improvement over a bad design, still with having the north and south airfield in rotation or in utilization. You're not going to get the relief that we're searching for our residents. This is just spreading the noise out everywhere, plus the addition of RNAV to some specific corridors. So I think it would help my neighbors to the south, my colleague from Elmhurst. I think it would benefit them slightly over D, but I still think B and even C would be better.
Chicago, Ward 39.
Yeah, same thing here. There's not much more to add. The RNAV thing is we're not in favor of that, as well as the split airfield concept is what we favor. So we would not vote to move this forward.
Ms. Plains.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I have some of the same concerns that have been addressed and been put forward. This doesn't really improve much over the previous one, so I'll probably not be supporting it.
Thank you. Elmhurst.
I think this is a slight improvement over D as it gets rid of the consecutive week impacts. I think this is workable. With that, it rotates evenly, and I think Elmhurst would support this one moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Howard Heights.
Thank you. My comments on D that I made will also apply to E, in addition to the RNAV, which we are not looking at this point. So I will be voting no on this.
Mark Ridge.
Thank you, Chair. We would also concur in voting no on advancing this proposal, much as for the same reasons under alternative C. The introduction of RNAV at this point would not seem to be prudent.
Thank you. River Grove.
I totally agree. Return my time to the chair.
Schaumburg.
Yep, for the same reasons that we expressed concerns with RNAV as well as for D, we're not supporting this alternative.
Schiller Park.
Again, agree with everything's been said. Don't need to rehash. Schiller Park does not like this at all.
Wooddale.
Wooddale is not in favor of this.
And Niles. I agree with what Evan said, what Bensonville said, and the others that were against this. Niles doesn't see any value in it if the idea is to spread it out as much as possible. Now, having said that, we got to go through the rebuttal time now. Quickly, Bensonville.
I yield.
Chicago, Ward 39.
Yield.
Des Plaines.
I'll yield some of my time to Dan to see what he has to say about it.
Dan?
Sure. And this is really ties back into the RNAV discussion, and independent of D&E, we still think what's not being honored is the spirit of the vote to at least discuss it. The only way you can do that comparative analysis is when we get to population impacts. So the same analysis can be done for both vector and RNAV. And at least then we can say to our constituents, hey, we looked at both alternatives, we did the analysis, and we advanced the best option. And I fear we're sort of skipping that step by thinking that voting down RNAV at this stage precludes us from that discussion. But thank you.
All right, Elmhurst,
No further comments.
Harwood Heights,
Yield.
Park Ridge,
Yield.
River Grove,
Yield.
Schaumburg,
Yield.
Schiller Park,
Yield.
Wooddale,
Yield.
Niles yields. Jeanette, can we hear the motion again and then call for a vote?
Alderman Dunn made a motion to advance alternative E. Alderman Chester seconded the motion. And we're going to go into roll call. Bensonville,
No.
City of Chicago 39th Ward,
No.
Des Plaines,
Yes.
Elmhurst,
Yes.
Harwood Heights,
No.
Niles,
No.
Park Ridge,
No.
River Grove,
No.
Schaumburg,
No.
Schiller Park,
No.
and Wooddale.
No.
Alternative E does not advance.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alternative F. Do I hear a motion and a second to, for the advancement of alternative F?
So moved. So moved.
I'll second.
Okay. Ryan?
Okay, alternative F. Alternative F includes 6 configurations rotated over a 6-week period. This alternative includes the full airfield concept. There is only one vector heading per departure runway. The alternative specifies that the departure heading should not use runway headings for those vector headings. There are 4 east-west parallel configurations and 2 crosswind configuration weeks. So the alternative is 6 weeks overall, alternating between west flow and east flow, with operations occurring on both the north and south airfield, as well as including the crosswind runway.
Hey, Janita, could you go in the living room?
Oh, there just is. Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Discussion begins with Bensonville.
So while this is simple, the same issue still applies. Runway 10 left, 28 right, and 10 center, 28 center are so close to each other that they would almost receive noise every single night, except for, I think it would be week 6 on this one. For that reason, I'm going to have to vote no on this one.
Chicago Ward 39.
Yeah, also voting no. I mean, again, the concept of one thing is that we like multiple departure headings. I think this is the only one that has one departure heading, and again, some of the same reasons that Evan gave it, we would vote no on this.
Des Plaines.
Well, I'm undecided on this one. I'll use my time to Dan to see what he has to say.
Thank you. Just to highlight some of the other key differences on F. Again, it's full-length departures from the South Airfield, which aren't constrained, which I think we keep overlooking at the North-South Airfield. The current FAA stipulation is full-length departure unless operationally necessary. And I do think we're going to regret further in the analysis when we see what the South Airfield burden is once we plug in wind, that you aren't going to have that option available for the residents in the South Airfield. The other thing we think the full airfield does that's being overlooked is it deconflicts the north airfield. If you look at the other north-south airfield options, all three of your north airfield configurations are conflicted, either with ground movements or with intersecting runways. And while the FAA has determined those are feasible, what we've learned from the past tests and rotations, anytime you introduce a conflict, it's at some sacrifice to utilization. And we don't know what that is yet until we get a little further in this process. So we still think advancing one concept with full airfield for that type of analysis is prudent, because truthfully, we haven't done that analysis. And just to address one of Evan's points, and this is something that was never happened in the prior discussion because these were eliminated so promptly. Both those runways aren't open. The runway you're seeing highlighted in blue is a different concept. That's a construction alternative. And that runway would only be active if one of the other two runways are closed. Because what we noticed with IFQ is the amount of disruption due to construction, in which we only got, 48 weeks out of 3 years. And one of the key advantages to the full airfield is it can maintain that quadrant predictability even during construction. Whereas the north-south airfield, in those construction situations that can't be scheduled, those extended periods, you're impacting all 4 parallel quadrants. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Elmhurst.
Yes, I think alternative F has a lot of merits. Number one, it's highly simple. There's just 6 different weeks. It rotates through east and west and equal traffic diagonal. There's even a balance of the potential to use that is balanced as well. If you look at the graphic of the departures and the arrivals, that is the graphic that impacts the least amount of people, residents out of any of these configurations. I think the one departure heading, especially on the parallels, it is a good thing since you try to avoid as much as possible on the departures, the same heading as the arrivals. One departure allows you to do that. And on the diagonals, you're able to, although it's not RNAV, you're able to take advantage of the compatible land use on the tollway. So this is a simple, balanced approach, and I think it has a lot of merit, so we're supportive.
Okay, thank you. Harwood Heights.
Thank you. I think it's more of the same with using a full airfield without providing maximum relief to residents. Thank you.
Park Ridge.
Thank you, Chair. From our standpoint, we would not be in favor of pushing through alternative F and advancing it, much as the same concerns in regards to operation of a full airfield and potential safety concerns.
River Grove.
I agree.
With Ernie, with Park Ridge?
Yes, yes.
Schomburg.
So I agree. On the surface, I really appreciate the simplicity of alternative F. And for that reason, I want to like this alternative, but I I think my concern just comes back to consecutive impacts. And I appreciate what Dan said about a construction alternative, but I also think we have to acknowledge that we know the runways can't be used 100% of the time every night. And so when you look at the fact that, you know, you've got 3 weeks in a row where the South Airfield is the designated long runway, and with the wind variables that have been discussed, I just have concerns that there isn't a way to shuffle this order to minimize those consecutive impacts in a way that would actually be effective. And I think that the reality is that construction alternatives are going to need to be developed based on the specific construction program that's being proposed. And I don't know that trying to fit, and maybe that's a discussion for the next round, and maybe we can, but as much as I tried to figure out how this might work for us, I think at the end of the day, alternative F is just concerning from kind of that, you know, full airfield air traffic control concern, and then just the consecutive impacts. I just can't see a scenario where we're able to eliminate those consecutive impacts. I'll yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Schiller Park.
Schiller Park also agrees to everything's being said against moving F forward. So no for moving F forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Wooddale.
Dale's not in favor of this alternative. I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, Niles. Again, some compelling things have been brought up about this alternative, and conceptually, it sounds good. Again, I'm fearful about the practicality of using the whole airfield. And Niles is going to vote no. All right, let's rebuttal. Bensonville.
Just want to point out that if the purpose of introducing Robert's rules is to hear more from members, we've accomplished that. If it was to hear less from non-voting members, we have not accomplished that today. I yield.
Okay, if I could just comment on that, each member has the ability to yield the floor. And if that's what they want to do, that's what we got to do.
I think yielding it to other voting members would make sense.
Okay, thank you. Chicago Ward 39.
Yield.
Des Plaines.
I have no further comments on this.
Elmhurst.
I think although there's definitely not overwhelming support for this option, there is some. I think it's advantageous to move forward with more than one or two options. This is the only split or full airfield concept that we have the potential to move forward. I would suggest that it's advantageous to keep this one in play.
Harwood Heights.
Yield.
Park Ridge.
Yield.
River Grove.
Yield.
Schaumburg.
I think Elmhurst brings up an interesting point about potentially moving forward one concept. I would agree that if we're going to move forward a full airfield concept, this would likely be the one to do it. So something to think about. I don't know what, I guess I have to decide quickly, but I think that's an interesting point.
All right, Schaumburg, Schiller Park.
Schiller Park yields for any comments from JDA.
JDA.
Thank you, Schiller Park. SOC is opposed to alternative F. It is ranked number 4 of the 7 alternatives. The full airfield concept provides zero relief to the north parallel and south parallel communities, especially when you consider the alternate configuration for wind management. In all of the weeks, all 4 quadrants of the airfield will experience noise. So we are opposed to that. We are opposed to splitting the air traffic controller's attention in the air traffic control tower. Additionally, the concern with full-length departures is manageable. The FAA has expressed a willingness to allow for full-length departures. And I think that's something the committee can encourage. And I yield the rest of the time.
Thank you. Lastly, is Niles. The only thing I'd like to say is that the purpose of this entire exercise is to advance 2. Now, if we advance the 2 and we find that the 2 are not responsive to what we want, that does not stop this group from going back again and looking at another alternative. What we're trying to do right now is find 2 alternatives that we can look at in depth and see if we can accomplish the goals that we created in the criteria. That's what I see. And then I use the rest of my time. Jeanette, you want to state the motion?
Yes. Alderman Dunn made a motion to advance alternative F and was seconded by Karen Robles. And I will call the roll now. Bensonville.
No.
City of Chicago 39th Ward.
No.
Des Plaines.
Yes.
Elmhurst.
I don't believe that we have any agreement that there's only 2 options moving out of this. I don't know where that came from. I vote yes for this.
Harwood Heights.
No.
Niles.
No.
Park Ridge.
No.
River Grove.
No.
Schaumburg.
No.
Schiller Park.
No.
And Wooddale.
No.
Alternative F does not advance.
Okay, so this is where we are now. Right now, we're coming up to an hour and a half, and I wanted to try and keep these meetings to around an hour and a half because I found that when we go past an hour and a half, we lose focus as a group. So what I propose is that we adjourn today's meeting, and next week we pick up the last 2 alternatives for a good discussion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to request a motion to adjourn. I have some things.
So moved.
I have some things I'd like to say to you after.
Second.
All right, okay. All right, call the roll. Jeanette?
We need comments from the audience.
Oh, we'll get to that after we adjourn because the comments are usually taken after we adjourn, don't we?
The only comment that Schiller Park has, did you say Friday? And I believe it's Thursday is our next meeting?
Thursday's our next meeting, Jeanette?
Yes.
Okay.
January 28th.
Correct.
Who seconded the motion, Joe?
I did.
Okay, thank you.
All right, okay, let's call the roll.
Bensonville.
Yes.
City of Chicago 39th Ward.
Yes.
Des Plaines.
Yes.
Elmhurst.
Yes.
Harwood Heights.
Aye.
Niles.
Yes.
Park Ridge.
Yes.
River Grove.
Yes.
Schaumburg.
Yes.
Schiller Park.
Yes.
And Wooddale.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do we have comments from the audience?
No comments.
All right, very good. The next Fly Quiet Committee meeting will be January 28th. At 9:30. I guess I adjourn this meeting. See you next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Aye.
Bye.
Have a good day, everyone.